And I call to order and reconvene to open session the Monday, December 11th, 2017 regular board meeting. Jackie, can you call the roll?
Mr. Rasak?
Here.
Mr. Karubas?
Here.
Ms. Peel?
Here.
Ms. Donahue?
Here.
Mr. Rising?
Here.
Ms. Price?
Here.
Ms. Deming?
Here.
Okay. Ms. Peel, would you lead us in the pledge? And now, because of timing, if you look at our agenda, we have a 2017 tax levy hearing that has to be held at 7:05. So I think, yeah, let's try a board salute. Ms. Peel, do you have a board salute?
Yes, I do. The board salutes Neuqua Valley cross-country coach Paul Vanderstein, who was recently named to the Illinois Track and Cross Country Coaches Association Hall of Fame. Paul has been coaching the Wildcats cross-country team since 1997. Congratulations, Paul.
Thank you, Kathy. Ms. Donahue?
The board salutes Neuqua Valley's Jillian Schneider, who was recently selected for the University of Chicago's Outstanding Educator Award. Recipients of this award are chosen from letters submitted by hundreds of students who nominate an educator who has influenced them, challenged them, or helped them along the path towards intellectual growth. Congratulations, Jillian.
Thank you.
And I have one. The board salutes Metea Valley teacher Stephanie Stout and her 11th grade chemistry class as one of 5 state finalists in the Samsung Solve for Tomorrow contest. This program encourages students to solve real-world issues in their community using classroom skills in science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Stephanie's class was chosen based on their proposal to use STEAM skills to address extracurricular participation. To tackle this project, students will develop a ride-sharing app specific to the school district, which will allow students to coordinate rides with one another to and from activities outside the school day. This will then increase student involvement and simultaneously decreasing pollution and traffic congestion. Congratulations to Stephanie and her students. What a great idea.
Right. We have to hold off. It is now 7:05. We need to stop the meeting to open the tax levy hearing. Mr. Strang will review the 2017 tax levy and truth in lending process.
Good evening, board members. Tonight we're taking the final step in the process that will ultimately result in the extension of our taxes. The context for this levy request is a new and not completely known educational funding system passed by the state of Illinois. Most recently I heard we won't know what we're going to receive for this fiscal year until February now. So every time I talk to somebody, it gets bumped off a little bit. The state continues to threaten school district finances with pension cost shift and freezes to our property taxes. Of our 3 revenue systems, federal, state, and local revenue is the only property that we can count on, and the only one that has gone up in recent time. As you're aware, we operate very efficiently as a school district. Our operating expense per pupil is the lowest in lower than the state and national level, and 25% lower than the other DuPage County unit school district averages. Recently, the Board of Education refunded bonds at a lower interest rate, saving taxpayers $10.4 million. And over the past 4 years, bond refundings have saved taxpayers in excess of $25 million. The Illinois School Code gives the authority for the Board of Education to levy taxes on real property within a school district to support public education. This is an annual process that must be completed before the end of December. The Truth in Taxation Act provides that if the levy request exceeds 105% of the previous year's tax extension, a public notice and hearing are needed before the levy can become officially adopted. Since this levy request does not represent a 5% increase, we are not subject to the Truth in Taxation cap. Having said that, we continue to follow the act in an effort to be transparent. Therefore, 20 days prior to the adoption of this levy resolution, the Board of Education estimated and announced its tentative levy in the amount of money it deemed necessary to be raised for property taxes. This tentative levy was approved by the Board of Education on November 13th. We are now recommending that the board set a levy in the amount of $292,059,166, which includes our bond and interest levy. It's important to note that this is just the request. This is what we're asking for, and it's not what we're going to receive. While this request represents a 3.9% increase over the 2016 levy extension, the district is subject to the tax cap legislation, and we will not receive 3.9%. In fact, depending upon the amount of new property, the district should experience about a 3.1% growth in its levy. It's also important to note that the levy calls for a bond and interest levy of $27,181,556. This is in accordance with our bond restructuring plan and will pay off the debt of our schools. Over the past 26 years, the property tax cap has faithfully limited property tax increases to the collar counties to that of CPI, and it continues to do so. The consumer price index used for this tax cap was 2.1%. The district therefore will receive 2.1% increase plus the amount of new growth. With the tax cap, CPI is the critical factor and not the tax rate. The rate is simply raised or lowered by the tax cap as the formula for the CPI cap. Tax rates this year will drop as property values have increased in both Will and DuPage counties. DuPage County existing EAVs have increased by 5.6%, and Will County existing EAVs property values have increased by 2.2%. For the 2017 taxes, the average homeowner will experience a 2.1% increase in their taxes paid to Indian Prairie School District 204, the same amount as CPI. The levy is set in an amount that assures the district will be able to access property revenues from new property. This levy is based on the fiscal 2019 budget. Current projections for the 2019 budget suggest that it'll be very tight, which includes the revenue generated from this levy request. The estimated increase in property taxes proceeds for the district is $8.1 million, of which approximately $2.7 million is from new property. Later in tonight's agenda, we'll ask the Board of Education to approve both the resolution to adopt the 2017 tax levy and the working cash fund levy. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, before we do that, I just want to note that this would be also a time for public comment, and there is none. So with that, for the 2017 tax levy issue, with that, we can now go to questions.
I have none.
I
Yeah.
got a curious question that I have never asked. Why 705?
That's a good question. I'll look that up for you.
Magic about it.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I need a motion to close the 2017 tax levy hearing.
I move that the Board of Education close the 2017 tax levy hearing.
Need a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Jackie, can you call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Rising?
Aye.
Ms. Deming?
Aye.
Mr. Karubas?
Yes.
Ms. Peel?
Aye.
Mr. Razak?
Aye. Motion passes. We now reconvene back into our regular meeting with one final board salute.
District 204 named to the College Board's 7th Annual AP District Honor Roll. The board salutes Indian Prairie School District 204 as one of 447 districts across the United States and Canada that have been selected for the 8th Annual AP Honor Roll by the College Board. Districts on the AP Honor Roll have simultaneously increased access to advanced placement coursework while maintaining or increasing the percentage of students earning scores of 3 or higher on AP exams. Honor Roll districts defy the expectation that expanding access automatically results in a decline in the percentage of exams earning scores of 3 or better. Congratulations to District 204 staff and students for this remarkable achievement.
Thank you. And before we go to our student report, you might note that Mr. Rising is invisible. He's not here. He had a work commitment, and it is permissible for him to join us by phone if he is away from work, so that's why Mr. Rising is on the phone today. We now go to our student representative report. We have Alexa Jordan from Metea Valley High School with us today, I think. There she is. Hi, Alexa.
Well, hello everyone, and happy early holidays. My name is Alexa Jordan, as you just heard, and I am the class of 2018 Executive Board class representative for MV Student Government. And we have had many new exciting developments at Metea Valley this month. So first, Metea honored our servicemen and women on Friday, November 10th, in our Veterans Day Assembly, where we heard from Sergeant John Tritchard, veteran and MV teacher Claudio Torres, and Pastor Ed Doppel. Additionally, ROCAP Social Studies Honor Society completed a service wall where all past and future names of Metea students who serve will be honored in several other patriotic displays. Additionally, chamber singers performed for the Rotary Club of Naperville for Veterans Day. Student government also wants to congratulate seniors Shashank Vijay, senior Alexa Jordan, and junior Josna Bal Murray as the Metea Valley representatives that have been selected to be on the Aurora Youth Council. Additionally, now we go to athletics.
Congratulations, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
You really congratulate yourself?
I did. That's awkward, isn't it?
It is.
We would also like to congratulate our student athletes on their exceptional performance in the classroom. The Metea Valley Fall Varsity Student Athlete Average GPA is a 3.74, and the first place varsity sport was girls tennis with a 4.31 GPA average. It's pretty good. Additionally, Metea is very proud of our 17 all-conference athletes. Two of these athletes, Michaela Dowd and Evan Lang, are also the Aurora Beacon News Athletes of the Year in volleyball and soccer. Last month, girls swimming placed 8th in state for girls tennis, and Metea placed in the top 20 for girls tennis. Boys soccer won regional champions, and girls volleyball were undefeated conference champions. So great job to our Metea athletics. Additionally, we go to our music department. We would like to congratulate our 900 students who performed at the 9th annual Collage Concert. Additionally, 10 Metea Valley musicians have been selected as all-state musicians. Treble singers performed at Notre Dame and received tremendous feedback. Additionally, Metea also received an IPEF grant to have Rich Moore, a professional jazz saxophonist, work and perform with our students. And finally, Metea Valley will once again present its annual Madrigal Show on December 14th, 15th, and 16th. And this dinner theater production will feature over 40 magical singers, 2 jesters, Metea's Royal Brass Ensemble, String Ensemble, and Recorder Ensemble. And I hope to see all of you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great winter break. We now move to our public comment for non-agenda items. If you are here to speak to an agenda item, that comment will be taken immediately prior to that item. 30 minutes is allowed for public comment, and each person is limited to 3 minutes. When addressing the board, we ask that you respect the confidentiality and safety of our students and school district personnel. We also ask that those addressing the board be cognizant that this is an open meeting and is available to all age groups. And as such, ask that you consider who the audience members are this evening and keep comments age appropriate. Public comment represents the voice and opinion of the speaker. There will be no feedback from board members during the meeting, but follow-up will be provided by an administrator as appropriate. Our first speaker is Nikki Guerrero.
Good evening. My name is Nikki Guerrero, and I'm a parent of 2 students and 2 future students at Brookdale Elementary. I'm also a proud 2000 Mobanzi graduate.
Go Warriors.
I've come tonight to speak about our district's need for a long-term solution in relation to overcrowding at many schools. I want to start by thanking the board for taking time to listen to the residents. The recent Engage 204 series has been very impressive and has brought together residents from all walks of life to discuss pressing issues. After hearing detailed information from the district and the demographic experts, the consensus from around 250 attendees last Thursday was that the district should stop the process of moving small groups of students from overcrowded schools. In the proposal we just handed out, if you look towards the back at Figure 1, you will see some of the changes that have occurred in the past 4 years. So the green arrows represent 2013, and we've got students going from Longwood to Brookdale, Longwood to Brooks, we've got Young to Brooks and Young to Steck, we've got Cowlishaw to White Eagle and Cowlishaw to Owen. In 2016, then we had students who now are leaving Brooks going to Young, students leaving Watts to Young, Watts to Kendall, and Watts to Owen. And in the most recent proposal, we are now going to send more students from Brooks to Young, students now from Brookdale to Longwood, Brookdale to Cowlishaw, and Brookdale to Watts. So many times you will see that there are arrows actually back and forth, kids going from one to the other and the other back. You can see how these changes are repeatedly creating islands and disrupting communities and the education of students at those schools. Last Thursday, the community spoke loud and clear. The consensus was that instead of these short-term solutions, it is necessary to redraw boundary lines throughout the district to ease overcrowding at many schools K through 12, and that this should be done as soon as possible. With that in mind, I respectfully ask that the board consider other options in relation to the short-term overcrowding issue at specific schools. A group of us at Brookdale put together this proposal, but we hope you will also consider other viable options as well before making changes next year. In the district's current recommendation, many students who live within walking distance are bused to other schools. But in any long-term solution, it would be based on proximity. So moving kids now that are within walking distance will inevitably lead to them moving back once we make different boundary adjustments. If we're optimistic and the experts can work with stakeholders to make boundary change recommendations 1 year from now, I believe it is less disruptive for families and schools, less costly for the district to move areas now that will inevitably move to a different school, their neighborhood school, after the larger adjustment is made. Other options discussed at the Engage 204 event included possibly portable classrooms until we have additions, or consolidating underutilized schools. So there is no easy solution, but we ask that you look at other recommendations that would align with the long-term solution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
you.
Next speaker is Marat Malibaga.
Mr. President and members of the board, thanks for letting me speak tonight. My name is Murat Moliboga, and I have 2 children who love going to Brookdale Elementary, and a little one who's excited to be there in a few years. Although I'm not personally affected by the boundary adjustment proposal, I deeply care about children in our neighborhood. It might be helpful for you to know that I'm the head of quantitative research at a financial firm. I analyze data, and I come up with investment solutions. From many years of experience, I have found that I don't come up with the best ideas on my own. And the key to successful research is transparency and collaboration. Initially, I was encouraged that the board was very clear about seeking solutions. As our community came together to understand the issue and develop potential solutions, we experienced a few challenges. Lack of access to data, as well as the unwillingness of the administration to be transparent and open to other solutions. Perhaps there are valid reasons for that, and it would be helpful for us to know and understand their position. In this particular case, I know that the issue of boundary adjustments is very complex. In my experience, solving complex issues requires a high level of transparency and willingness to consider other perspectives. And each of us here has a role to play. The administration has experience, resources, and access to very detailed and confidential data, such as enrollment by grade, and those are critical for developing potential solutions that are implementable. However, those solutions are also based on assumptions and the thought process that need to be transparent and consistent with the desires of communities of our district. For example, if our Brookdale community is willing to live without a designated art and music room for another year, then the proposal of the administration that relies on 22 sections instead of 24 will be inconsistent with the desire of our community and displace too many students. It is my hope that the board would consider multiple options that are put together by the administration and community collectively and pick the solution that reflects the needs and desires of our communities. A greater level of transparency and collaboration among the administration, communities, and the board will lead to better solutions. We're going to follow up with a written proposal that describes in detail how our suggestions can be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our last speaker is Carrie Cole.
My name is Carrie Cole. I'm here tonight because I'm one of the many who wants the best possible solution for all students. I, along with the One Brookdale community and other community members, have a strong desire to be involved in developing and providing input on a better solution. Along with the approximate 200 other parents, community members, District 204 staff, business owners, and school board members, I attended the Engage 204 session last Thursday evening. At the end of the session, when each table's facilitator spoke, specifically on Task 2 regarding how their group feels on under and overutilized schools, not one single table of the 28 total tables selected Statement 1, which was the district should continue to utilize all buildings and make smaller adjustments to attendance boundaries as often as needed to best accommodate students and programs. Statement 1 is the administration's proposal, and it's unanimous that the community is not in favor of this ineffective solution. In fact, 23 of the 28 groups at Engage 204 feel the district should do a comprehensive study to adjust all attendance boundaries that would impact more students but be in place for a longer period of time to better utilize existing buildings and ease overcapacity conditions in the north. Furthermore, 16 of the 28 groups also feel that the district should explore consolidating underutilized schools and redraw attendance boundaries for impacted schools so the district can operate in the most cost-efficient manner possible. 4 other noticeable themes at Engage 204 were keeping students in their neighborhood schools, transportation concerns and challenges in regard to busing costs and daycare before and after school busing, the need for the administration to be more transparent, and more community involvement in these decisions. It is evident that the District 204 community desires longevity from any potential boundary adjustment and wants to be involved. Furthermore, in response to the administration's short-term solution to adjust Brookdale boundaries in 2018 and 19, the One Brookdale online poll shows that 83% are willing to sacrifice overcrowding for 1 year while a long-term solution can be planned in the coming 18 months. As our school district makes decisions on its upcoming challenges, it's more important than ever to unite and collaborate to implement the best solutions possible. For our community, engagement does not stop at merely filling out a worksheet. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We now move to our consent agenda and superintendent report. We begin with our superintendent report. Dr. Sullivan.
Okay. Well, I think you guys probably noticed it's definitely starting to feel like winter out there. So just a reminder that our winter weather guidelines are posted on the website, which I hope we don't have to use. As been mentioned by several of our public comment folks tonight, we held our second Engage 204 session last week on the topic of changing enrollment. We had a nice turnout from the community. And our next session, it will be in late January, January 29th. And in this one, it will focus on the community's expectation for the kind of education that they want our students to receive. So the meeting will again be held at Still Middle School from 7 to 9 p.m. And we encourage everyone to come out and participate in these very important meetings. So we need to hear everyone's voices in this process. Visit the Engage 204 website for more information. And lastly, at this time of the year, we often have stories about how our students in our communities step up to help others who are not so fortunate. And I just wanted to share one of those that came to my attention today, and this involves Neuqua Valley's Student Council. They're helping out a number of District 204 families that need extra support over the holidays through their generous donation of gift cards. And when I say generous, I mean extremely generous donations. Student Council advisors Jennifer Yavorsky and Amanda Dunham work with the Student Council to provide support to District 204 families in a number of ways throughout the school year, but we wanted to thank them and share our appreciation for their commitment to our families. So that's it.
Thank you. We now move to our consent agenda. I need a motion for the approval of consent agenda items D through J.
I move that the Board of Education approve consent agenda items D through J as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Jackie, call the roll, please.
Mr. Carubus?
Yes.
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. Deming?
Aye.
Ms. Peel?
Aye.
Mr. Rising?
Aye.
Ms. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Razak?
Aye. Motion passes. Now move to our action item, which is the approval of the 2017 tax levy resolution. I have a motion.
I move that the Board of Education approve the 2017 tax levy resolution and the resolution adopting working cash fund tax as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Didn't think so. We didn't have it before. With that, Jackie, call the roll.
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. Peel?
Aye.
Mr. Razak?
Aye.
Ms. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Carubus?
Yes.
Mr. Rising?
Yes.
Ms. Deming?
Aye.
Motion passes. Now, moving quickly to our discussion item, which is moving the mission forward, curriculum and instruction update.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. Joining me is Laura Devine Johnston, Yvette Dubiel, and Jennifer Law. And tonight we're going to talk to you about moving the mission forward. At our November 13th Board of Education meeting, we presented a great deal of data under the school report card presentation, and we left you with what do we do about it. And tonight that's what we're going to talk about. What do we do with all that data, and how do we move forward? The purpose is to provide you with an overview. We currently have the Curriculum and Instruction Implementation Plan, our Equity Plan, our District Title I Plan, and the Supporting Struggling Students Plan in process. These are related to a variety of board policies, including many in Section 6, but we'll focus on 660, 6110, 6140, 6170, and then 710 as we move forward. Tonight we want to present the highlights of each of these plans and talk a little bit about how they're connected. These plans were generated using a variety of feedback, including our assessment data that we presented in November. They are fluid plans, which means that they're constantly changing and being modified based on reflection, monitoring of progress, and Illinois State Board mandates and policy changes. So tonight we want to share with you the plans. When we talk about these plans, we want to highlight just a few things. I think Michael Fullen is the one who called it simplexity, to pick out a few things that will have the greatest impact and really concentrate hard on those areas. So we're just going to highlight some of those areas. These plans are really reflecting the work that's been done by our teachers, our administrators, and they don't represent things that are just happening today. Some of the work has already happened, some of it will continue to happen as we move forward. And then finally, we want to talk to you about next steps for social emotional learning. So as you know, our mission statement is to inspire all students to achieve their greatest potential, and it encircles this graphic of our 4 plans. The graphic shows puzzle pieces because all of these plans fit together, and some of the activities within them actually overlap. For instance, many of the curriculum and instruction activities overlap with the equity teaching and learning plan. So we'll highlight an area of those as we move through this. But we want to share with you the highlights of each of those 4 plans as we move forward in helping all of our students to grow. The first plan we're going to talk about tonight is the Curriculum and Instruction Implementation Plan. Off to the side, you see that there are 4 strands that we have focused our attention for work with our students. Future-ready skills, flexible delivery of instruction, documenting and using results, and to provide a research-based curriculum. Under these 4 strands, we're highlighting 6 of the major activities, or 6 areas of focus as we work through looking at those strands. The first one is the continuum of delivery of instruction. When we talk about that, we look at a traditional face-to-face model where students are sitting in their desks and a teacher is up in front. And then at the other end of the continuum is completely online, where the teacher and the student communicate through a digital device. In the middle of that, along that continuum, is blended learning. And blended learning has many structures to it. It can be a structure of attendance, it can be a structure of scheduling, it can be a structure of location, or it can be an instructional model of how we organize our classrooms. This is an area of focus for us this year. We've had you'll see in our course book for the upcoming school year that we are adding, I believe, 7 high school courses that have the blended learning after them, which indicates that the structure of those courses will be changing a little bit for students. So we want to make sure that students know that this is not a traditional model of instruction. The second area of focus for us is personalized learning. We've talked, and I think we even gave a presentation that looked at personalized learning previously to a previous board. But the highlights of personalized learning are really looking at inquiry instruction, where we start with a question and we move forward and help students to answer that question. Looking at digital resources and adaptive resources. So digital resources can mean ways to assess students, even just students being able to do research. The adaptive piece comes in with some of our digital resources being able to scaffold learning for students. For instance, if a student responds to a question incorrectly, the adaptive digital resource will then reteach, give a new model for it, and bring it down so that the student can have another opportunity to answer that question correctly or to understand that concept. Same thing happens if a student will respond in a correct manner. The adaptive resource might increase the complexity, increase the volume of the question, or add more for the student to respond to. The third area is an acceleration plan. This comes from the Acceleration Placement Act, Public Act 100-0421, which takes effect on July 1st, 2018. And through that act, it requires us to adopt and implement policies on acceleration, including the opportunity for a student to have an acceleration plan. So we'll be working through what that looks like as we get more information from the state, and there'll probably be a policy recommendation at some point to review that policy. Many of the components of that act we already have in place in our district, but there will be some things that we might have to adjust and amend in order to make sure that we're compliant. Then the third area is computer science framework. There's been a lot of work done previously. We've changed some courses at our middle school. We've added courses. In fact, the board approved AP Computer Science Principles recently. We've added robotics and maker spaces to all of our elementary schools and some of our middle schools and high schools. But really what we want to do with a framework is look at a systemic approach to computer science. We know that research is telling us that future careers for our kindergartners will all involve some sort of computer science in them. So we want to make sure that we're exposing all of our students to the information that they need in order to be successful in that area. You'll see also balanced literacy is a focus for us. That includes reading, writing, speaking, and listening. We want all of our students to read, and we know that being good readers helps with all of the other content areas. So that will continue and has been a focus for us for a long time, but it will continue to be a focus for us as we move forward. We want data to drive instructional practices. So when we talked to you before at the workshop on assessment, the landscape of assessment, we looked at a variety of assessment resources that we had, things that we've used with kids. And one of the things that we've talked about is we want to be able to have assessment data that tells us what works. So when we implement a program, for instance, our Title I preschool program, we want to be able to look at data and see if it worked, if our students were successful, if the practices that we used in order to teach those students were helpful in their growth. And then we also want to be able to answer the question, who benefits from it? Who are the students that would benefit from a certain program? So as we move forward, we'll be looking at data to drive those instructional practices forward. And then just to highlight two areas of curriculum revisions, we have standards that have been reviewed and revised in both social studies and fine arts. So a lot of our social studies work has been done already, but we're continuing to look at that at middle school and at elementary. There are strands to that. One is disciplinary content, and the other one highlights inquiry. So we want to make sure that our curriculum reflects and is aligned with those standards. And then the other is fine arts. And I believe we are going to have a board presentation in February to talk a little bit about the fine arts standards and tell you a little bit about how things will look in that area. That is the highlight for Curriculum and Instruction Implementation Plan. Did you have any questions about that plan? We'll move on.
The portion of the plan that I'd like to share with you is our Every Student Succeeds Act. This is a key piece with our District Title I plan. As Kathy mentioned, she and Charles shared a portion of the new act, ESSA, and some of the accountability measures. Tonight I want to share with you and focus on the Title I portion. The Title I portion provides us with additional federal funds to allow us to provide equity and opportunities for some of our students who are in low income. So one of the things that we are able to do with our Title I funds is to provide supports for students who are designated as eligible for McKinney-Vento supports. McKinney-Vento is the law that was enacted to support students who are designated as homeless. So all of our schools who have students who qualify for McKinney-Vento have a portion of funds that they receive through the Title I grant, and they are allowed to use that for essential items, perhaps needing a winter coat, school supplies, a graphing calculator at a high school may be necessary for a student, as well as provide tutoring supports for a student, whether that be so that they can pass a class or whether in an elementary building we need to bring their skills up to grade level. Another thing that we use our Title I funds, we have decided to really focus on early intervention, and so we are providing Title I preschools. We currently have them in 3 of our Title I schools, and we service 120 students. We run morning and afternoon sessions at McCarty, Longwood, and Gombert with 20 students each. So that is one of my favorite places to go and watch those 20 students participate. Longwood is the program, the Title I preschool has been at Longwood for about 5 years now, and so families are very used to having that opportunity, and most of the students who participate in that particular program are Longwood students. We're able to do transition activities to kindergarten and let the preschoolers go down to kindergarten and visit when it's time to go. The teachers are able to spend time talking and making plans between what they're teaching in kindergarten and what they're teaching in preschool. So that has provided a great deal of support for our preschoolers. Another thing that we use our Title I funds for is to look at summer and extended day programs. For example, last summer we ran some talent development activities. There were STEM camps at 2 of our school-wide Title I buildings, Longwood and Georgetown. There were also opportunities that we used the Center for Talent Development through Northwestern to come and to provide some courses that students and scholarships for students to participate in those activities that they might not have been able to participate in. In all 5 of our Title I schools, we provided summer reading programs. So we had what the kids thought was a book fair. At the end of the year, we had books lined up in a particular area. Students got to pick about 50 books each and put them in their summer bag, and then we mailed them to them over the course of the summer so that we could really encourage reading and prevent that summer slide. In some of our buildings, we had the LMCs open in the summertime, and so students were able to come in and talk to staff and share some of the books that they had. If not, there was a little postcard that they could mail it back to a teacher and say, I liked this portion of the book. So that was very positive, and we were able to get books into the homes of some of our low-income students. Another thing that we do is provide extended day programs, and this year schools are really looking at using some of those personalized learning tools and activities that Kathy just mentioned for students. So students who are struggling will stay after school. They love it. They don't know it's tutoring, even though we call it that. But they participate in this year probably will participate in some of our computerized programs such as Lexia and Dreambox with staff present so that they're able to stop and do some instruction if kids get stuck. We're very excited this year. Right now we have 2 schools that are Title I called school-wide. That's Longwood and Georgetown. And we are able to use our funds for any of the students within those schools as we do Title I. The board approved those plans years ago, and those schools have been updating the plans yearly. We are also writing plans for our other 3 targeted assistance programs, McCarty, Collishaw, and Gombert, to be designated as school-wide. Currently, McCarty, Collishaw, and Gombert are targeted assistance programs, which means that anything that we buy with Title I funds can only be used for a particular subset of students. So that makes it kind of difficult when you have a good resource and you can only use it with certain kids. So we want to have the flexibility to be able to use that funding and those resources with all of our kids. So McCarty, Collishaw, and Gombert are writing plans for those. They've engaged in a needs assessment and are really developing a reform strategy that will help their schools and help improve achievement in their school, and then we'll bring those to you in the springtime for approval. Any questions about our Title I plan?
I had thought the Title I, the whole school-wide was something about the number of students, and then you could make it into school-wide. Is that what's happened at these other schools?
Good question. So the state has allowed, or the state or the feds have allowed us to do a waiver. So you are correct in that school-wide, once a school reaches the 40% mark of 40% of the population is free or reduced lunch, then you can become school-wide. But now you can access a waiver if you reach up to 20% or 30%. So that's where our schools are at now. So we will be requesting that waiver.
Okay. Yeah, great.
And just a reminder that the board approved the district Title I plan in July. So that was something that had to be approved in order to start the grant process, and we reviewed that with you in July, and it was approved at that point.
How long have we been implementing a Title I preschool?
The Longwood program has been there for 5 years. Prior to that, we had one class, I think, downstairs, so a good at least six years.
What ages?
3 to 5.
And, well, two more questions with this. How do we encourage those 3 to 5-year-olds in that community to participate? It seems like that would be like a great program to be in.
It is, and that's why we really like having it housed in our Title I schools, is because, in fact, it just happened. I happened to be in a building where a mother had come in, and she was there for a meeting for her other student, and she had a 3-year-old, and the principal said, "Is that little gal in school?" And mom said, "No, I can't afford preschool." And he said, "How about this?" And she started the next week. So, you know, word of mouth sort of happens the longer that they're in their home schools.
The other piece I would add is that Spark is a group that we're affiliated with in the city of Aurora. It's called Strong, Prepared, and Ready for Kindergarten. And they do a great deal of outreach to where they go to neighborhoods that have been determined to have a great number of preschool students in where the families are in poverty and the students aren't in school, and they do outreach in those areas, and then they feed them to us. So they'll work with kids, talk with parents, and then say, well, where do you live? And then they'll call and say, we've got somebody for you. So that's been very helpful as well.
So since Longwood has had a program for 5 years, have some accountability data on how those kids are doing, and, you know, what does it look like?
Yeah, Kathy's been looking at the data. I've seen some of the kids and their successes that are in 3rd grade now, but you've looked at some of the data.
Right. Jenny Giambama was very helpful in collecting data last year, and we looked at their Ames Web scores. So as they went into kindergarten and 1st grade, we looked to see were they still at risk, because one of the pieces of it is that you're an at-risk kindergartner, or you're an at-risk student if your family is designated living in poverty. And so as we look at it, our initial pieces were 67% of our students who stayed with us were no longer at risk in math, and 82% were no longer at risk in reading. So our initial results were really positive. We've expanded now to look at it a little deeper. Working with Charles and his assessment team, Barb Vaughn has been very helpful in setting it up, because we'd like to know in kindergarten and 1st grade, are they still at risk? 2nd and 3rd grade, where are they? And to continue to keep monitoring that to see, just as we said before, did it work, and who benefits from it?
Any other questions in this area?
The Title I program is a federal grant program, and the criteria for it are based on income, right?
Yes.
So this grant doesn't impact any of the other subgroups we look at, right?
No.
Just free and reduced lunch, right?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Yvette?
So, excuse me. So following the equity audit, we had a district equity leadership team put together some ideas of how we can address the equity issues that we may have seen in the audit. What you'll see in the equity plan is not necessarily derived directly from the district equity leadership team. A lot of it is what we have been doing, that we have been able to capture on the plan, and a lot of it did generate from the important work of the district equity leadership team. Part of that equity plan was to identify 4 major strands. So the next couple of slides will talk about the items in each of those strands. So the first strand we identified in the work of DELT is, by DELT I mean District Equity Leadership Team, is leadership. One of the things that we know is that research suggests that having a diverse staff that reflects our students as best as possible is good for all kids. So we've implemented a number of hiring and recruiting practices to encourage applicants to apply at District 204. For our hiring practices, for instance, Doug and his HR team have been instrumental in generating a list of questions to ask of candidates during the interview process, because as much as it is very important to have a racially diverse staff, we also know it's important to have diversity in our mindsets. We also have board policy that support our value diversity, and we've done a couple of things in working with college and partner universities. One of the things we noticed in having conversations with colleges and universities is that students of color generally apply to district teachers of color, generally apply to districts where they believe the students' population reflect them. And there were many teacher candidates that were very surprised at the diversity of Indian Prairie and the serving towns. So we kind of led a communications campaign to share the demographics of our districts. So we've gone into colleges and several local universities to share our demographic and share our commitment to equity, and that has really generated interest in seeking out employment in our district. We also have a Work For Us video that you may have seen. This video is a video that highlights the diversity and distinct qualities of Indian Prairie. It's found on our human resources page, which is important because every applicant that applies for the district needs to see that page. As well as our board policy that values equal employment opportunity is also highlighted in that page. This video is also included in all the presentations and workshops where we've been able to get into colleges and universities. The second strand of the equity plan is teaching and learning. Again, a lot of those items are derived from things that have been already been doing, that we're working on, that have been accomplished, but we've, again, been able to capture it in the plan. So as Laura mentioned, the expanded preschool opportunities is really instrumental to get those little ones acclimated as soon as possible, and it's really neat to see them work with the big kids when necessary and close those gaps as best as possible. One-to-one, I don't think we can underestimate the work that technology has brought into the classrooms. We've seen that expand learning. We've seen that develop greater understanding of content. We've seen collaboration between the students, problem solving, and personalized learning. And we know the one-to-one technology is really a significant tool to narrow the opportunity gaps among our students. Summer Bridge Program is an opportunity for incoming freshmen to develop skills, to build on their confidence before they enter 9th grade in the fall, and this has been really instrumental as well to their learning. You'll be presented with more information about Equal Opportunity School, but it is highlighted equity plan again because it's such an important role that that program has initiated. Under professional development and growth, we have some culture proficiency and other professional development that has been delivered across the district. Last year, we began delivering culture proficiency to all staff members. At the end of January 2018, it would have been delivered to all bus drivers, all custodians, all Aramark lunch staff, all administrators, all CEC staff, and teachers at every building. As soon as next week, we will start a second-year rollout of professional development focus on equity, and it's called Understanding Implicit Bias. This, again, will be rolled out to all staff. And it's interesting to note that as of July 1st of this year, the Illinois State Board of Education mandated a new professional development for all personnel focused on culture proficiency and bias. So we're excited that we have been proactive in this work, and we've actually been tapped on for how we've delivered some of that professional development to our staff. Additionally, we offer personalized learning and custom PD opportunities for our staff members. So following professional development, there is an opportunity for staff members to request some additional support. We have a menu of professional development options for our staff. We offer a 32-hour face-to-face extensive PD for staff, and we have some casual Twitter chats that staff members can participate in regarding conversations of equity. And our final strand for the equity implementation is the family and community engagement. Last year, with the assistance and the recommendations of our district parent groups, we set forth and conducting parent interviews throughout the district. I was I had the opportunity to conduct interviews with parents in all of our district parent groups, and principals also conducted interviews. Each principal conducted an interview with a handful of staff, and we've since collected all that data, almost 800 responses, and we looked at where we're at. So the district equity leadership team has engaged in a very deliberate and important task of identifying what do we hear people saying over again, what are those concerns, and now we've identified those themes based on our equity plan, and the next step with that is to develop some actions regarding and responding to those parents' comments. And this really ties into our increased outreach to families. Principals have been instrumental in communicating to families throughout the district, in encouraging families to support academics at home and to get involved as possible. It does not have to be necessarily what's visible at the school level. Questions?
I just, and this kind of really, I think under the curriculum, but the bridge programs, we've got it for the middle school to the high school. Do we ever consider it in like elementary to middle school too, or
A summer program?
just the summer programs? Okay, so it's
Yeah, we
basically
have not, we do some transition activities with our 5th graders to 6th graders, but we have not at this time looked at a summer program. Part of that reason is with high schoolers, they're a little bit more independent and a little, to be acclimated to a high school environment is a little different. All of our 5th graders are moving to the same type of environment. They've not been exposed to switching classes and things like that. So there are many things that the middle schools already have in place to help support all students make that transition to changing classes, different teachers, team dynamics, lockers, and things like that. Whereas moving from the middle school to the high school, the building isn't as different. It's more about the expectations and the relationships. So we have not at this point, but it's certainly something that we could consider looking at. So who's eligible for that summer bridge program? Like, what are the criteria? It's a conversation with middle school 8th grade counselors and teachers, with our high school deans and APs and teachers, and they really look at students who maybe their GPA isn't as high as it could be, students who aren't as engaged in their learning, or just students who maybe could use a boost, maybe could use some excitement around school and things like that. And so they meet together in early spring, and they start talking about the students that would benefit from it. Some of them are students who might be taking an AP class for the first time, things like that, and then they agree together, and then they contact parents and talk with students about being in that program.
Other questions? I have one in terms of, and I know this is probably an agenda item for a different time, but with those parent interviews, what were some of the highlights?
Well, actually, it's funny because I would tell you the positive remarks have been overwhelming. I committed about 4 to 5, I think, chart papers on just positive remarks. So the highlights have been communication. The highlights have been a lot of families stating that they appreciate the welcoming and inclusive environment, that they feel that they can go to the school if there are concerns. Overall, the quality of the district and their students feeling like and knowing that their teachers care.
And what challenge emerged?
I think what's interesting is the variety of perspectives that often are experience or culturally related. So, for example, I recall an interview I had with a parent that spoke about too much homework at the elementary level. Kids need to play. In the next hour, I had a parent that said, we don't have enough homework. We need to challenge kids more. So I think the challenge is just the perspectives of experiences, and sometimes it's very culturally related.
And sometimes it's related to an individual student's need as well. So,
The interviews, did I understand that some of the interviews were conducted by I'm sorry, I apologize. Did I understand that some of the interviews were conducted by principals?
Yes.
So, I guess, how readily, how did families feel or parents feel about sharing information with principals? Because that could be a little heady, I would think, for some persons who may not be as comfortable coming into the school. So how did those?
It actually went really well. The interviews that we did, that principals did, were not as in-depth as the interviews that Yvette did. But we asked principals to reach out to 5 parents who you don't see real often around the school. And so we wanted to sort of look at and hear their perspective when we perhaps perceived them as being disengaged. And just the fact that a principal reached out or called them and asked their opinion was, there was lots of positive comments about that. We just shared a lot of those positive comments at our all-principal meeting last week. And one of the common themes was families that we don't see real often in the schools talking about conversations that they are having regularly at home and how they support it. So it was very eye-opening for us as administrators to really broaden our perspective and think about what does it mean for a parent to be engaged in their child's school, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're in the library volunteering. Of course, those parents are engaged, but other parents are also very engaged.
Mr. Karubas?
Yeah, so on slide 12, we talk about a summer bridge program. And then we talked about a summer program on slide 10.
Mm-hmm.
How do those differ? Is there overlap?
The difference is age, and the difference is concentration. So for the summer bridge program, that's students going from 8th grade into freshman year of high school, and the focus is really on building a relationship with the high school and having those students get a leg up on understanding and the building, the structures, the expectations, and building relationships with some of the administration and some teachers at the high school. The elementary summer programs with our Title I schools were more about engaging students in maintaining some reading skills over the summer, as well as some talent development. So many times when students can't access a more rigorous curriculum, like our Project Arrow program or things like that, it has a lot to do with exposure to things. So we took the summer to give them, to invite students and give them the opportunity to be exposed to some of that more intense curricular work, to some of those concepts. We did a little pilot with some students at one of our Title I schools, students that did not pass or look at weren't proficient enough in their math skills in order to be in accelerated math. So we spent a couple of weeks with those students doing some math concepts, some exposure to some field trips to looking at applications, and then once school started, then we gave them that same assessment, and many of them, I believe it's over half, were now proficient and were put into that accelerated math program. So we look at maintaining skills as well as improving skills, and then providing some opportunities that they might not typically have.
Thank you.
Other questions? Can move on.
All right. Okay, moving on. So the next section of our puzzle is the supporting struggling students. As you know, we have been working since last year with a group called the District Management Group, DMG. One of the things that they did when they came here last year is we had a very comprehensive survey that staff filled out. It detailed their entire week, how much time they're spending on each activity, how many students they're working with at a time, how much time they're spending on paperwork. So then they took that information and they disaggregated it. They went through and reviewed it and came up with some interesting points to share with us. Another thing that they went through was they had some focus groups. So we had groups of staff and we had groups of parents. Can you guys hear me okay? Who worked with the DMG. They had interviews. They talked about strategies. They talked about concerns, and then they compiled all that data as well. They came, they toured our schools, we visited some classrooms and observed. We created a group called the Guiding Coalition, which is representative of staff across the district. and administrators. We meet on a regular basis to talk about the recommendations from the DMG. One of the things that when we met this year, they came back with all their data and they said, here are the things that we identify as areas that you guys can work on. And then the Guiding Coalition reviewed that, and we kind of went through and determined how many of those things were kind of like the biggest bang for your buck. What can we do quickly and without a lot of effort to start moving forward, and then which of those things are going to take a lot more effort that we need to have like a longer strategy plan. So the three things that we identified as a group were developing and expanding our multi-tiered systems of supports, which, with RTI, it's the two sides of the triangle. You've got this side with the academics, which we have several of those interventions already identified, and we're always going back and reviewing those and expanding those as our students' needs expand and change. And then the other side of the triangle is our social-emotional learning side. So, and then Kathy's going to talk about that in a second with Castle. The next thing that they identified was looking at our schedules to prioritize what we do and finding extra time to work directly with students. And then our third option, or our third priority, was looking at the amount of time that we're spending in meetings and on paperwork and trying to find ways to streamline those processes so that we have, again, more time to spend directly with students. So, go back if you don't mind. So, with the scheduling to provide extra time for students, DMG has a software system for looking at schedules where about a third of our elementaries are using it already, and then this year the rest of the elementaries will be trained in how to use it. So they'll be able to develop a schedule, a master schedule for a school where they're able to begin by identifying the priorities in their schedule, and then it all builds around that. So we went to a demonstration last week on it. It's amazing software. So that's a way that we can start like aligning the services of students so they're not all being pulled out throughout the day, and you can have more cohesive instruction throughout the day with the classes. The middle schools and high schools are also working to find times to have blocks of intervention time for the same level of instruction. And then the third one is prioritizing our staff, the time that we're spending in meetings and with paperwork. I actually just sent a survey out for this next round for staff to complete with just looking at how much of the time they're spending preparing for meetings, how much of the time they're spending in meetings, and then once we get all that data back, we're going to look and see how many of the staff are spending the majority of their time, face-to-face with students, and how many are overwhelmed with the paperwork. And then we'll have those people come in and have the focus groups again, talk about what are you doing in your buildings that you're able to have this time, develop your schedules so that you're able to spend more time with students face-to-face and try to find what's working and use it across the district. Because we know that in special ed there's a lot of paperwork and there's a lot of meetings and there's really no way to get around those meetings and that paperwork, but there may be ways that we can eliminate some of the unnecessary paperwork. So that's the goal.
I've had some experience because I did my internship here. Your IEP meetings were the most efficient IEP meetings I've ever been at, and I've been to several districts now. So that surprises me that you could make these meetings even shorter. And I don't know how you streamline paperwork unless you're talking about the use of technology and getting systems in place that are easily accessible. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, we did get a new IEP system this year, which has made a big difference because the other one, the one we had before, wasn't, what's the word for it, intuitive. Wasn't user-friendly. So with the new system, people are reporting that it's much easier to navigate through the system. They're taking less time just filling out the paperwork. Some of the suggestions that some of our buildings will have, they'll send home the draft goals ahead of time, so parents have a time that they can read them and digest them. They don't have to come into the meeting with 10 people staring at them while they're trying to read them for the first time. Having parents and encouraging them to kind of draft a a paragraph or two about what their hopes are and their goals for their child, so that when they come to the meeting, because a lot of times, when you're as a parent, you go to the IEP meeting and you're kind of like, oh, there are a lot of things I was going to say, I can't remember what they are now, because there's all these people looking at you and it's stressful. So just making it a more relaxing atmosphere and sending the stuff home ahead of time so people can review it, those type of things.
Cool.
In some of our presentations on response to intervention and also in the district management group presentation, everyone has identified that they wanted to try to look at the interventions again and make them more systemic across the board. Now, I know it's only been like 2 or 3 months since we've got that report.
All
So,
done. It's all streamlined.
no, I'm sure,
and done.
well, that wouldn't be true. So, and if it is, you went too fast. So where are you with that process? Is it identifying those interventions in schools and see what everyone's using and then trying to make that more, systemic across the board?
So we had a group of administrators that Jen and I led and really identified the interventions being used across the district, and looked at what those were, shared those with all of the schools, and now schools are in the process of looking at their own triangle of supports and identifying what they are using in their buildings. And then when we marry that with the work that we're doing on assessments so that we can look at and really see, okay, this intervention is really working, then we'll be able to share that in a much more succinct way across the district and say, okay, we now know that this intervention for 4 of our schools has had a much bigger effect size than an intervention being used in a couple other schools. So that's where we're heading.
Another component of that is making sure staff know how to use those interventions. So we've been providing a lot of training.
Okay, good.
You've mentioned the multi-tiered system of the support, so, and that's kind of a newer way for our district to start looking at it. And you're talking about assessments, so screener, the universal screeners for social emotional, and you're looking at that too, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's actually what Kathy's going to talk about next with the marriage with the agreement with Castle.
Okay, all right.
Perfect segue.
There you go.
So we looked at these, and you can see how they all work together. You've probably heard personalized learning in almost every one of our plans. Just an example of how things are connected and how they overlap. We presented this information to our General Assembly, which is made up of our building administrators as well as our CEC administrators. And we had them go through some of the components and look at where they fit in the plans. And they said, well, we see social emotional learning throughout, but we think it needs its own piece. And so we just put it right smack dab in the middle of the graphic. And also we're able to join the partnership with the DuPage Regional Office of Education and the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, which is called CASTLE. And we, Karen, signed an agreement to be a part of that partnership, which looks at ways to identify and demonstrate successful strategies. Just as we look at our plans for a systemic approach, this is going to help us take a look at our social emotional learning in a systematic way across our whole pre-K through 12, as well as through the STEPS program, to look at how do we address social emotional learning throughout our district. They'll be able to support us. We have a coach that will guide us. We've identified a team of teachers, mental health providers, and administrators just as we have the guiding coalition with the supporting struggling students. This will be kind of our group that oversees, and we'll be able to invite others to join in that work as well. But we'll start with an assessment. They have a rubric that looks at, here are some components of a strong social emotional learning program. Where do we fit? And what kinds of things. One of them will be looking at, is there a screener? Are there assessment tools, as well as interventions and, some of that Tier 1 instruction as well. So we're excited to get started with that. Our first meeting will be in January, and we'll report back to the board as we move forward and create a plan for that as well. But we wanted to make sure it flows through all 4 of those plans, but everyone felt it needed its own piece, and so we put that in the middle there.
What does can you explain again what the coach for this social emotional learning does, and maybe have you identified who that person will be?
It's actually a coach provided by the DuPage ROE in Castle.
Okay.
It's someone, Ruth Cross, who's very knowledgeable and very supportive, and has done some work at one of our schools already, but is going to help nudge us, push us, and make some great decisions for kids.
I was hoping that was who it was, because I actually met her the other night at one of the League of Women Voters forum that they had, and she was very excited to work with our district. So very amazing ideas, amazing person who's got a vision for this, I believe. So it was just interesting having that discussion with her. So I think I think she'll be a wonderful addition.
I'm very excited to learn from her.
I want to thank everybody for putting that SEL in there too. You know, it's really clear that the mental health issues in our community and communities across the United States are tough. And in order for kids to succeed, we need to support that component also, because it's hard to self-actualize if you're thinking about other stuff. So, you know, thanks for putting that in, and thanks for that emphasis. I think that's important in this community and actually every community.
So with all that in mind, we know the drivers of this, and the real work happens in those classrooms with teachers and in the buildings with administrators, and they already do so many great things for our students. So coming in January 8th, we're going to do a presentation on how we support our teachers through professional learning as well as personalizing their own learning. And so look forward to that in January, and we'll share with you how we help support teachers to get this work done. That being said, any other questions?
I just have a comment. There were 27 pages of little things that you guys were going on, and so many of them were in 2017-18 that it was just really, you guys are so busy. And it's just, I really appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. And there's always new stuff. I saw Zeem. I'm like, what's that? Dreambox. So there were things I'd never heard of. So folks understand how much is really going on in this district. There's no way for us to know everything that is going on, and we're always being surprised with new stuff. And you're very innovative in your approach, and I really appreciate that.
Well, again, I want to thank you on behalf of all the work that's being done by everyone throughout the district. It takes everyone to get this done. We're really just relaying the work to you, but everyone is busy. Everyone works really hard in order to support our students and to help them achieve their greatest potential.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Board update. This afternoon, as a result of our Starting Right workshop, one of the recommendations from our Starting Right workshop was that we had a very lengthy board norm document that we all made a recommendation to try to put that into bullet points. That has been sent to you, a bullet point norm document that's a little bit shorter. Not quite at the level that Mr. Karubas would like us to have it.
Reached a compromise.
Yeah. So I'm asking that everyone please look at that and provide feedback in terms of those norms, since we should be following them. IPEF held its regular monthly meeting on December 6th. Highlights included the alumni directory is coming closer to fruition. Yes, PSI Publishing has been approached to complete the task. Discussion of continued fundraising activities occurred. Some specific and targeted organizations and foundations were identified, so they're going to work even harder to secure more money to support our kids. There will be active attempts to continue to grow the foundation board, and 2018 and 19 will signify the 30th anniversary of the foundation. So they want to have some anniversary events, so preliminary anniversary events were discussed with more to come. Susan, I know we talked about community engagement pretty much today, but anything you want to add to that?
It was a pleasure to see so many new faces at the meeting on Thursday, so that was extremely appreciative. We look forward to continuing to have the engagement, and as we move forward, please continue to look forward to the next meeting in January. Have a wonderful, I think we'll appreciate the holiday break, but we're going to come back prepared to move forward, and we really appreciate as many of the community coming out as possible, and we look forward to seeing more new faces along with the faces that have already been there.
Last but not least, I think as a board, we're going to wish all our students, our parents, our teachers, our staff, hopefully a safe and peaceful winter break. Enjoy the break. We'll get back to work in January. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
That's awesome.
You got it.
Yeah.
Motion and a second.
Do I have a second?
I did.
Yes, you do.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye. Thanks, Mark.
Mark was so quiet today.